Hello and welcome. Foolkiller is a forgotten classic story from Marvel Comics. This 10-issue series, written by Steve Gerber with artwork by J.J. Birch, is an examination of vigilantes and those they inspire. It utilizes some emerging technology, the early internet and bulletin boards, in a way that seems prophetic or cautionary. It was a story well ahead of its time, and possibly it's even more relevant today than it was back in 1990. The series opens on Greg Salinger, the second Foolkiller, who first appeared in Omega the Unknown. For the record, the original Foolkiller appeared and perished in Man-Thing. Salinger replaced him a few years later. After being captured by Spider-Man, Salinger was committed to an asylum for treatment. Years later, he convinces his psychiatrist to allow him some form of written expression. The implication is that Salinger is reformed, and he'd like a method to share his thoughts and explain how he descended into being the Foolkiller. Although, one can infer, Salinger is actually looking for recognition and acknowledgement. Like many individuals who proclaim to have special insight, he does have a certain level of vanity and a need to have others validate those opinions. We are then introduced to Kurt Gerhardt. He is a lowly loan officer who is forced to immediately return to work after his father's funeral. Gerhardt's thoughts are constantly on his father, who was the victim of a senseless crime. He is in emotional turmoil, struggling to maintain any sense of normalcy after the brutal death of his parent. Gerhardt's pathetic life is intercut with Salinger's attempt to get published. Over the course of many months, Gerhardt succumbs to depression. He loses his job and his partner. He is broken, and his life has completely bottomed out. He finds work at a fast food restaurant. One night, while working there, he fails to prevent a robbery. During his recovery, he slides deeper into a need for retribution and to prevent criminal parasites from thriving. Salinger finally negotiates a TV interview with Runyon Moody, a typical 90s tabloid reporter. His obvious agenda is to give Salinger a platform to speak, believing their ideologies align. Instead, Salinger criticizes capitalism and how consumerism creates a society that lacks poetry. The general population don't appreciate the inherent beauty of existence itself. Human life is based on survival, which typically means making loads of money, buying useless products, and nothing more. Values and ethics are meaningless in a corporate-controlled society. After seeing this broadcast, Gerhardt writes Salinger. Salinger openly dismisses the letter from Gerhardt, knowing his psychiatrist would disapprove of his actual thoughts. From there, Salinger and Gerhardt begin to secretly communicate through a bulletin board, so Salinger can hide what they discuss from his psychiatrist. To use modern terminology, Salinger radicalizes Gerhardt, giving him instructions and equipment to inspire him to take on the role of Foolkiller. Ostensibly, Gerhardt becomes Salinger's proxy on the outside, while Salinger becomes the father figure Gerhardt needs. Unlike Salinger, Gerhardt has a conscience. While he commits to the mission, there's a part of him that understands he has crossed a line. He is a killer, and that disturbs him. However, the more he does it, and the more he feels like he's making a difference, the less the killing bothers him. He becomes focused and in tune with his environment by literally training and sleeping in garbage. Gerhardt continues to mentally spiral downwards. Every significant interaction reaffirms his belief the world is populated by fools. He questions his own sanity before doubling down and fully committing to being Foolkiller. He evolves into his final form. Until this point, Gerhardt went after street-level thugs. However, his perspective has changed to see the bigger picture. He finally realizes the biggest fools are the ones in control. So he changes his focus and sets his sights on a self-serving, high-profile, rich developer. While successful, this murder brings a lot of media attention to Gerhardt's cause. After killing a few police officers, the ensuing public outrage makes Gerhardt realize his time has become very limited. There's intense scrutiny, the media has turned against him, and his true identity is finally discovered. Gerhardt knows the Foolkiller must die, and he must die publicly. Foolkiller was a bizarre publishing choice for Marvel Comics. It didn't have flashy artwork, and it explored a grounded, real-world theme. It stood in contrast to the fistfights and melodrama of a typical superhero comic. In fact, outside of a brief, perfunctory appearance of Spider-Man, there are no superheroics whatsoever. Quite simply, it was noticeably different, and ultimately, it was overlooked. Mind you, it starred an obscure villain from the 70s, so that probably didn't help. It was also grim and gritty, during a time when that was at its height of popularity, so it was drowned out by numerous other gritty, surface-level slop being published. The coloring itself is murky, grimy. It gives off a dirty, dark vibe. It's highly appropriate for the subject matter, but at the same time, it needed a brightness boost and some added vibrance for balance. Early scenes, with text on a computer screen, are literally unreadable, and some artwork gets lost in the murkiness. Now, let's look at the main characters. Greg Salinger is probably an allusion to the author J.D. Salinger, who wrote Catcher in the Rye. Notoriously, this was a novel a number of deranged people seemed to admire. So Salinger, the character, wanting to become a writer and inspire others, is a direct connection to that novel and its influence. Kurt Gerhardt is likely inspired by Bernard Goetz, the man dubbed the subway vigilante back in 1984. Goetz was an average-seeming guy who shot 4 men on a New York subway when they attempted to rob him. He became both a heroic and a vilified figure. His acquittal on charges of attempted murder sparked a huge debate concerning racism, self-defense, and citizen vigilantes. These are all qualities Gerhardt exemplifies. The tabloid TV host, Runyon Moody, is likely an amalgamation of a few widely known TV hosts, such as Geraldo Rivera, Maury Povich, and Jerry Springer. They all engaged in antics to shock and entertain whatever mob happened to be watching them. While the overall series might not be subtle, there are a lot of character beats and moments that allow for further interpretation. For example, in one scene near the end, Salinger breaks down. This could be interpreted a few ways. For one, he may recognize that Gerhardt has achieved much more than he ever did. He only wanted to inspire Gerhardt. He didn't expect him to achieve greatness. And this realization hits him hard. He will never achieve the recognition he believes he deserves. He has become overshadowed by his successor. Another interpretation is more existential. Salinger realizes the Foolkiller persona is a force of nature, so to speak. His actual poetic ideals are somewhat meaningless to the balancing force the Foolkiller represents. He, like Gerhardt, may hold high philosophical principles, but at the end of the day, they have fooled themselves into believing they have special insight. They don't. They are merely symptoms of the disease that is society and culture. They represent the very thing they want to change. While not explicit, Salinger is a father figure to Gerhardt. Gerhardt's real father died because he was weak, and in Gerhardt's mind, he deserved his fate, although it takes him some time to accept that realization. Salinger exemplifies all the traits Gerhardt idealizes. These are traits Gerhardt desires to avoid becoming like his real father. It's a classic rebellion syndrome, where the son avoids any comparison to his father by choosing a radically different life path. To Gerhardt, Salinger is that path. Another indication of Gerhardt's mental state is the adoption of a BDSM type of costume. While he does have the appearance of a leather daddy, he's actually more of a power bottom. I'll leave it to you to research those terms if they're unfamiliar to you. Gerhardt is a bottom because he's a masochist, always looking for things that reinforce his pain and anguish. For the record, there's no pseudo-sexual element. That element is normally present in those that cause serial crimes. Foolkiller is a vigilante, so he's motivated by righteousness, not physical gratification. This new costume helps contrast the difference between Salinger and Gerhardt. Salinger was a swashbuckler with classically romantic ideals of ethics and honor. Gerhardt is much more street-level, and his morals reflect modern times. Finally, unlike Salinger, Gerhardt struggles with being Foolkiller. So he's a tortured soul, bound to his vigilante mission. Again, he's the epitome of masochism. He submits to the process. There's one potentially distasteful element that needs to be explored. For the majority of the series, Gerhardt goes after street-level criminals. These are almost exclusively people of color, which gives Gerhardt's mission the appearance of being racially motivated. It's unclear if that was the bias of the writer, or the writer expressing the bias in the general population. Considering this is Gerber, I would lean towards a critique of public perception and response. After all, a number of criminals and junkies are eliminated, but that receives very little or no attention. As soon as Gerhardt adjusts his focus to include a wider demographic, the Foolkiller is suddenly a problem and needs to be captured. So, publicly, he's silently endorsed until he becomes a threat to everyone. Furthermore, to defer the appearance there's a racial element, Gerhardt's first victims are skinheads. Additionally, the robbery at the fast food joint, the incident that triggers Gerhardt, is perpetrated by white people. So it seems Gerber acknowledged the potential conclusion that Gerhardt was motivated by skin color, and he made sure to insert scenes where that was not the case. In the end, Foolkiller is one of the best stories by Steve Gerber. It lacks some of his usual choices, such as a metaphysical or spiritual element, and it's laser-focused on character building. Unlike his past work, the satire is grim commentary that isn't played for laughs. Noticeably, there's a lack of cynicism. Not that it's hopeful, life-affirming, and everyone's happy at the end. Quite the contrary. But Gerber's voice is measured and more grounded than usual. It's a mature piece of work that respects the audience. Considering this is a mainstream Marvel title, Gerber did a lot within the restrictions he clearly faced. I mean, somehow it's code approved. I don't know how. Because there's one scene where Foolkiller literally empties a crack house, and that ends with a rather disturbing, drawn-out elimination. I'm pretty sure whomever at the Comics Code reviewed that issue just looked for graphic images and didn't read it at all. Because, yeah, that's a brutal scene. It might not be pleasant, but it's a series worth reading. It's a cautionary tale that, unfortunately, still seems relevant. Thank you for watching. Thanks to all my fine supporters on Patreon and YouTube. Your ongoing support makes it possible for this channel to continue. I appreciate every single one of you. Please subscribe if you've not already. Leave a comment and a like. I try to keep ads and self-promotional bits like this to a minimum, so if you can, consider directly supporting this channel on Patreon. Extra special thanks to Plutocracy, Spencer Estes, Green Man, Constant Disappointment Records, Jeff Nicholson, Sicken, Francis De La Cruz, Russell Bull, John Nyukes, Andrew Barton, Odin Ashcroft, Ruby St. Dennis, Phil Sagan, Edward Clayton Andrew, Corey Drew, Brian Deaton, Tom Granis, John Gaunt, James Graham, and Matt Marino. You are all justified and ancient.